Well, welcome to the Red Chair. Today, our guest is Michael de Mello. Michael, great to see you always at Indico. You are in Florida, you are in Estoril, you're a professional investor, one of our investors. Um, where did your career start?
My career started in New York. I went to New York in 1975. We had a little thing called a revolution here. It prompted me to go to the United States to be with my mother, stayed at her house in New York, got an undergraduate degree at Columbia and an MBA there. Worked for the United Nations while I was studying, and then took a internship during business school in mergers and acquisitions. And then I went to work in a bank when I graduated. Was briefly at Bear Stearns, and then made the mistake of starting a company with some friends in software and telecommunications. But probably my first direct private investment was in a recording studio.
Oh, really?
Yes, in Fifth Avenue and 30th Street, which probably we should have taken the real estate, but anyhow, that was another story. And I was involved with that for about 2 years.
But while you did, after you did the investment banking?
No. While I was in school,
Okay.
still. But my first serious full-time job coming out of school, I went to work for a bank that was bought by State Street, I think. The name of the bank was Irving Trust Company. Did the training program, went to the Brazil desk when I graduated from the training program, and then this was in 1982. And as I arrived on the desk, shortly thereafter, there was two things that happened. First, the Argentinians invaded the Falklands or the Malvinas, which we have to take your choice.
I remember that.
And then that was, I think, in February, and in May, the Mexicans said they couldn't pay. So all lending to Latin America was frozen. And so I was the new guy on the desk, and Irving was particularly a correspondent bank. And so they had relationships with other banks and a lot of companies. And so I was a banker, but I had no money to lend. And so I said, okay, well, I got to figure out how to, create some business here. And Irving was one of the top processors of funds movements. And so I figured, okay, even though we can't lend, we have a very good service platform. So let's find out who has dollars in Brazil, and let's see if we can bring them superior service. And at the time, we brought out the first, I think it was us in Citibank, the first PC-based funds transfer device, okay? And so I went after the people that had dollars in Brazil, which were the trading companies. So it's the subsidiaries of Petrobras and the coffee traders, and also the reinsurance company, okay, because they collected premiums in dollars. Okay, I did that on Brazil. Then the bank thought that was a good idea, and I got put into a group that did that for all of Latin America. Very tiring. 4 weeks on the road, 2 weeks at home, 4 weeks on the road, 2 weeks at home. We then started looking at, in Venezuela, trading some of these dollar assets. And the bank started saying, well, we really can't do that because these things trade at a discount and our book is at 100%. So if you go out there and you start trading, you're gonna, we're gonna have to take a haircut here. So we don't like that. And so I left Irving and I went to Bear Stearns, where they didn't have that issue because they didn't have a loan book. And then briefly thereafter, I started a software and telecommunications company with three other partners.
And this is while you were still at Bear Stearns?
No, I left Bear Stearns to do this at full time.
So you left the banking industry mid-80s?
I left the banking industry in 1985. So I graduated from Columbia in January of 81. I was 3.5 years at Irving, about 6 months at Bear Stearns, and then I went and started a company that would be an anachronism today. because we did what we did was the post-trade process of cross-border securities traders. Okay, and in those days, although the front office was very modern and to a certain extent very efficient, basically because people were talking to each other and doing trades, and they had very good models for trading. The post-trade process, particularly on foreign securities, was a disaster. Was archaic because it worked on telex, and it also, and in certain markets like here in Portugal, there was physical delivery of the securities. Okay, and so this process required an incredible amount of messaging, and what we put together was, again, on the basis of a terminal which was a compact 386, which was the fastest machine that you had then, that would take a trade record from a broker like Saloio Brothers, who was our first client, and would then distribute the messages. We used what at the time was the best network around, which was the Geisco Mark III network, which would allow you to, to distribute the message.
It was a proprietary network
of GE, but that they would sell out. And we located our operations office in London, because London, you still have to send some telexes, and London was the cheapest place to send a telex from, because London had this thing that there was BT, but there was also cable and wireless. Yeah. There was competition, and so the price of the telex was cheap.
So you were digitizing the industry before there was the internet, basically.
Yes, we were trying to, and the whole notion and the success of the business was based on the fact that Euroclear would not allow brokers to be a part of it. SWIFT would not allow a broker to be part of it. So a broker always had to go through a bank. The clearing of securities always Euroclear was owned by JP Morgan. JP Morgan made sure that you had to have an account with JP Morgan. Okay.
Curious.
So all these great, impediments, which, today don't exist.
So you saw an opportunity basically and so you left banking in the middle of like a decade, which was incredible for banking, right? But because you saw that the banking was going to have a huge revolution with all the deregulation and opening up of new types of securities and new types of deals.
I just thought that the opportunity for modernization was such, and there was such a dichotomy between what the front office was doing and the back office
was lagging,
and that there was an incredible opportunity in streamlining operations and modernizing operations to make things more efficient. And if you could make things more efficient, especially, you would have a trade fail. When a trade fails, you're out the money. Money has a price, and if you're out the securities, you're also out. You also have costs to it. Portugal was notable for that. In certain brokers here, they would trade with large foreign entities, and you then, when they wanted to sell, so they would you'd have to recertificate the securities, and then you got like a 100,000 share certificate. But then if you wanted to sell it, and you only could get 10,000 done at a time, you then have to go back to the company and have so these things were incredibly inefficient. And so we thought
that's also how you made money, right? There was the inefficiency of the market allowed for lots
obviously
of trades.
Certain markets that are inefficient are always more profitable than
very efficient markets.
Than very efficient,
but they have lower volume.
But from the user's perspective, right? If you can bring efficiency, you will be adding value to the end user. Okay,
and so using the market, basically, right?
So if you're, and that's even true today. Why are people so enthusiastic about AI? Is that you're talking about bringing incredible amount of efficiencies, even though I think we're still going to find out how much power we're going to need for all this stuff, and how much investment and all this. But the notion is always efficiency and whatever you're doing, the process is more efficient.
And so for how long did you stay in this company? How did it go?
Well, this company was sold in 1988 to a Japanese.
Good time to sell.
Yes, to a Japanese outfit called Recruit. They're still around.
So this is just before the crash.
No, after the crash,
was
87.
Oh, it was 87. You're
Yeah,
correct.
I was in London during the crash, and the crash was started on Friday. And we had a hurricane in London at the time that even cut down.
There was a hurricane.
Yes, on the.
But there was no climate change at the time.
No,
there were still hurricanes.
No, but they had yes. Can you imagine? And so there was a like a hurricane in London, and like it was these centenary trees at Kew Gardens fell. Okay,
beautiful.
And that was on Friday, and then on Monday was the crash. And our systems worked fine. We had the top of the line fault tolerant computers that were made by Tandem. That even if you took down power, they would fail. They would go down with no loss of data. They were not very efficient, but they were very effective. The same that were used by the Bank of England, by the Securities Processing Industries Processing Corporation of the United States, etc. Top of the line. And so we sold it to these to this Japanese outfit. And lo and behold, in those days, the Japanese were buying everything.
They bought at the top of the world.
They bought Rockefeller Center. They're buying it. They bought all the real estate in London. They bought Ferraris. They bought all the artwork and all that. And so what happened was that Japanese bought this, and I don't know how, and I was at the time, so we signed in the beginning of 88. My first daughter was born in August of 88. And so I had like a golden handcuffs gardening leave type of situation. And then at the end of 88, we moved back to Portugal because that was basically done.
You returned to Portugal.
Yes.
15 years after, 15 years after you left.
After I left. By that time, I spent 87 in London, and then at the beginning of 88, I came back to New York, and then at the end of 88, came back to Portugal. By that time, I was totally out of the company, and regrettably, the Japanese new owners, for some reason, did not like the Tandem setup, or maybe they had a consultant that came in and said, IBM is going to bring out a fault-tolerant computer. It was named Stratus, and it's going to be so much better than Tandem and so much faster and all this. And so the owners said, okay, so we're going to migrate to the Stratus platform. Well, in 2 years, they did not complete the migration. They spent $25 million in software programming and consulting to develop a new product. And at the same time, they did not upgrade the existing product. Okay. And so they basically lost all of their customers. We had people, like I mentioned, Solomon Brothers. These people need, you have to have exceptionally good customer service. You got to be on top of it. If you have, any issue in code or something like that, you have to fix it instantaneously. Okay. It's a 24/7 operation. Securities are basically, in those days, were traded 22 hours a day. The only hours is between the hours of 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. New York time. It's not traded, but at 7 p.m. then the Asia starts. So you have to be on top of it all the time. They dropped the ball. And so it was,
heartbreaking a little bit.
Yes. Well, it was particularly heartbreaking because the people, a number of the operations people that worked for us in London, they came and visited here in Portugal.
And they were super happy.
It was like, these people were very East Enders, very loyal, very committed to the company, and they just couldn't believe what was
So were you kind of like disappointed as an entrepreneur that the company you created was sold and then kind of mismanaged by the new owners?
Yes, but
it is what it is.
There's nothing that I could do about it. So,
right, but it was a good first lesson as an entrepreneur. And
yes.
Then what happened during the 90s? Where were you?
So I came back to Portugal. My cousin, who is now in a lot of trouble, has been in a lot of trouble since 2014, convinced me to some work for the Espírito Santo Group. I worked at the investment company, which became an investment bank. And I was able then to raise a fund in 1993 in which we did a basically buyout development capital fund. Our largest investor was the Soros Group. They came in with 54% of the fund, and that launched a new...
So you became a professional investor. You did some high-profile deals. What were the main lessons of that period of being like a professional fund manager, particularly with the backing of George Soros, right? Which is an iconic investor.
Well, I mean, actually, I didn't deal with George on the investments. He did play a lot of tennis with my wife because my wife's a very good tennis player. So he enjoyed that. And we were also members of the same club in Long Island. Deborah and George played a fair amount of tennis. And so we had a social relationship. But the person that I had the relationship at Soros Capital was Steve Gilbert. Steve Gilbert is probably, I think, one of the best investors and the most upright people that I've come across. Learned a lot with him, a man of his word, and we're still friends to this day. Our kids are friends, just a phenomenal person. So what I think that the most important thing that I gather from all that is that people make the business. And even though we were at that time, that all of the investments that we made were in the industry.
Yeah,
So we were packaging, contract manufacturing, we did batteries, we did dairy. Everything worked or didn't work because of the people that we got.
And these were investments in Portugal.
All in Portugal. Yes.
It was one of the first, if not the first, sort of buyout fund in the country, right?
Yes. And, the country was being integrated into the European Union.
There were privatizations going on.
No, we didn't touch that.
But there were in the country,
yes, there were.
in the 90s.
Yes. I mean, we made it, our focus in terms of companies were at the level that there would not be a political exposure. Okay. The privatizations were sort of a level up. We always wanted to be underneath the radar so that we could look at things just 100% economically and not have
any sort of political
any political exposure issues, etc.
But the companies at the time, they were in big need of modernization, right? I mean, how did you see that? Were they exporting already, or were they?
Yes. So the first one, the group that we bought was the three largest cheese companies in Portugal that were related among themselves. And there, the issue was not so much modernization. It was more of an issue of interlocking shareholders, and they couldn't. There were three companies that worked together, had some shareholders in common, and they couldn't get themselves to work all together. And so
you took over the three of them.
We took all three of them. We paid we got everybody out, and we basically then started to modernize the companies in terms of, but just working integrated, because they had a plant in Valtecambra and a plant in the Azores, which were very, very modern in terms of cheese production at the time. So, but it was more a question of integrating the management there. That ended up in the hands of Fromagerie Bell, the people that make the Laughing Cow. That we got out of that probably in 2 years. Then the second company that we bought was Colep, which was owned by a very prominent Portuguese entrepreneur called Elidio Pinho. I think the issue there was succession. Mr. Pinho's son had died in a tragic car accident, and I think that sort of took the wind out of Mr. Pinho in a way, and he just decided to sell the company. And that company was already selling probably 80% of its production abroad. They had bought a subsidiary or a plant in Spain. And so we basically took that and increased that. We professionalized the management. We brought in a chap, Jorge Ribeiro, who was the chief operating officer at Höchst. And we professionalized the company, and then ended up by buying. We bought
some
bolt-on acquisitions in Germany. We started a plant in Poland, and then we took the company public in 1997. Okay, that was probably by far and away the best investment of the fund.
How many deals altogether in that fund?
So the cheese companies were roll-ups. So there were 5 cheese companies that we ended up buying. The last one, which we did not bolt up, was Queijo Saloio, because they were in the Gouda type Queijo Flamengo. And so we bought was Lacto Lima, Lacto Lusa, Lacto Suriana, and Laticínios de Loreto. And then another one a small one in the Azores called Laticínios Covoada, and then Queijo Saloio. Okay, those were the 6 dairy companies.
And then you sold the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, we sold all the 5, but we kept the Fromagerie Bell did not want to buy Queijo Saloio. They said that's a different business. You've got a lot of fresh cheese. Short shelf life, we like to
In the
work.
long shelf life.
We like things with a long shelf life. We think that's a different business. It's more like yogurts. And so anyhow, so we stayed with Gerson. Then there was Colep. Then another one where it didn't go well. ESDCIL, a management issue. The family that we got in business with, we went into ESDCIL for them to through a share capital increase that would allow them to buy a French battery company, which was the first divestiture mandated by the European Union of the Fiat Electronics entity, which was Magneti Marelli. They had two battery companies in France. They were they were forced to divest by the European Union. They were put into like a conservatorship. And so ESDCIL wanted to buy one of them. It was a company called Stecool in France. It was the second largest battery manufacturer in France. So we went in through a share capital increase, allow them to purchase the French company. Probably, I don't know, 6 months into the business, 6 months, a year into the business, we figured out that the French managers were way ahead of the Portuguese guys. And so what we wanted to do was an inversion. Okay. Well, that was definitely not going to happen. And so rather than have a big fight and drag it out, we basically made a sweetheart deal to get out of the business. It was painful.
And so for how long? Why didn't you do? Did you do a successor fund? What happened there?
No.
You decided it was not worth it.
No, it was not worth it. And the moment in which this happened, number one, there was a lot of competition, and a number of sort of industrial players started getting into sort of the financing and buyout business. We figured that we tried to put together a deal to buy out at the time Sumol.
Mm-hmm.
We couldn't come to agreement with the management because we wanted to really rationalize. We brought in some American consultants that studied distribution is key in that business, and they study like the routes that the trucks take and all that.
It wasn't that efficient.
No, it was not, and there were reasons that they weren't efficient, which were not economic, and we wanted it to be economic. This is
old style economic for someone.
Yeah, exactly. Not for yes, for some. Yeah, and so we had a different approach, but that didn't. We couldn't convince the shareholders to change that. So yeah.
But you stayed. So until when did you stay in Portugal? Because then you left eventually. So,
well, so I was basically a Portuguese resident until 2009. Okay, and then I got a little bit sort of fed up with continuing harassments by the tax office. I spent a lot of money on legal fees. One of my cases took 9 years to resolve. I never lost any one of them, and I just had an ongoing difficult relationship with them. And I said, okay. And a lot of it because of having foreign income and the reporting being different in Portugal than it is in the United States. I am a United States citizen, so I file in both places. And I just said, no, okay, so I'm going to become a Florida resident. And by becoming a Florida resident, then I file a Portuguese tax return as a non-resident. And all my troubles went away in that regard. So, and I also like to water ski a lot. So, I found myself a nice place in a water skiing community. And so I managed to, my kids were all living in the United States, and we ended up in Florida. We have a place up in Long Island, which we visit frequently and which most of the kids use.
And you are an incredible water skier.
Well, I don't know about incredible,
an incredible athlete.
No, I'm a very.
I know you are. I've seen the videos and the pictures.
I water ski a lot. Let's put it that way. I don't know about the incredible part, but
you are for sure. And so you've seen entrepreneurship and investing in Portugal and in all over the world, and particularly in the US. And you've become an investor in other Portuguese businesses and an investor in funds like ours. Tell me, what is the good and the bad when you compare both situations? I know you are in the US almost on a full-time basis, but why do you think there's promise in Portugal, and what do you think is really not working out? I mean, there's lots of things that are working out, but if you had to sort of summarize it.
I think opportunity that exists in Portugal is that there is a lot of very well educated young people here that have a lot of ambition, And in spite of the fact that, the political system, the tax system, the legal system, etc., is not very helpful, that people have are very enthusiastic about putting businesses together, and they are very well educated, both personally and professionally. So it's a testament to the capacity of the Portuguese to be performant and be very entrepreneurial. And there's a little notion that I always say, the one of the richest countries in in the European Union is Luxembourg. Well, the majority of the people that work in Luxembourg are Portuguese.
Yes,
Okay?
30% of the population
Right.
at least.
But I'm saying of the workers.
Of the
okay?
workers, yes.
Okay. So we obviously have it in us, and I think that we've been failed by our institutions and our politicians here, and that's why probably we haven't done as well as like the Irish has,
As we should have.
which did very. I mean, we both entered the European Union more or less at the same time, and look at where the Irish are compared to us, right?
At least in a per capita basis,
Yes,
for sure.
yes. So I think that maybe even the fact that there is difficulty creates, opportunity, because the difficulty, as we say in Portuguese, aguça o engenho. Okay, it makes people be more sharpens your brain because you have to get around things. Okay.
Yes. And so, what would be like the advice you give to young entrepreneurs? Because you've seen also what works and what doesn't. What is missing?
What I mean, from sitting in on a number of the updates and of the investment reviews, etc., I think that the biggest pediment that I've seen is that entrepreneurs are not willing, and this is true not only in Portugal, but here I think that's more so. They're not willing to open up the company to professional men. Okay. When you go from being like seed, then Series A, B, and C, at some point, you've got to make a decision that you have to professionalize the company. It's no longer, a club. It is no longer a fraternity house. It's got to be a professional operation. And that transition is very difficult, I think, to effect, and also to know what is the right timing for that. Okay. At some point, if you want to grow and you want to expand, you're going to have to say, this has to become a professional organization, or then you're always going to be small. And that's really not what entrepreneurship is about.
Right.
But that's true, pretty much all around.
It is difficult for everybody. Yeah, of course. Wonderful. And what makes you think that VC is a good idea coming out of Portugal, in addition to the background in unicorns? Why do you think we can do well here in terms of venture?
Because I think people are very broad-minded, and the fact that we have a very small market domestically makes you have to think outside. And in the same way that, when I was growing up, if you didn't speak languages, you couldn't go very far. Okay. And so that's a little bit the same thing. If you only spoke Portuguese, you get to the Spanish border and you can get anywhere, right? The same way that, if you look at a business, whatever opportunity it is, and today with the amount of information that is available for people, if you want to think big, you're going to have to go abroad. In terms of your business, and to do that, you're going to have to be competitive with the world outside. And I think that knowing that from the get-go, that you're going to have to succeed in a wide universe, makes people understand that it's going to take a lot more than just what I'm used to. And that notion, that ambition, is what makes the difference.
Very good. Michael, thank you so much for coming to Ingo. Always good to see you. Thank you for sharing
Thank you for having
your
me.
experience.
Thank you for having me.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you.